o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Montana Senator Sen Tester is now the chair of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, and that committee authorizes more spending than all other appropriations panels combined. Now that panel is prepared to view President Biden's new budget for the first time. But before that happens, Tester spoke with MTN News today about what he saw and learned in a tour of military facilities and manufacturers last weekend. Tester visited military contractors and bases in Virginia, Georgia, and Florida. Got to speak with military personnel and manufacturers. He says he was impressed with military leadership and enlisted personnel, and that he hopes that Congress and the Biden administration listen to what they need to keep the country safe. Tester said Congress also needs to hold the military accountable for rooting out possible problems in the ranks, such as sexual assault and racism. He also said a big part of the future focus of our military efforts must be on cyber capabilities, which both China and Russia are concentrating on.
If you want to talk about fighting the next war and not the last one, cyber is a huge part of this. And we've got to make sure that we've got the right minds working to be able to deliver what we need to keep this country safe. We saw what our opponents could do with the Colonial Pipeline, and because that pipeline was shut down because of an outfit in Russia that wanted to raise heck with our economy.
Well, Tester says the committee should get a first look at the president's new proposed budget next week. For the first time, President Biden has expressed support for a ceasefire in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The intense fighting, which has lasted for more than a week now, has left more than 200 Palestinians dead, including 61 children. Since that fighting began, more than 3,000 Hamas rockets have been fired into Israel. And while the vast majority have been intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome, Israel has reported at least 12 casualties as well. Today, in a phone call to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Biden reiterated his firm support for Israel's right to defend itself and also for the first time expressed support for a ceasefire. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the U.S. wants the fighting to stop.
Our goal remains to bring the current cycle of violence to an end as quickly as possible, and then bring the parties back to the work of building lasting stability.
Earlier, Israel allowed some humanitarian aid and some aid workers into the Gaza Strip, a move welcomed by the UN. Well, friendships come in many forms, but some are undeniable from the start. This was true for a Billings soldier deployed overseas for the first time away from home and in search of companionship. He found it in an unlikely source. Here's Q2's Andrea Lutz with tonight's Positively Montana.
It's a bond that only began a year ago.
She cracks me up.
But long before that, fate was already working its magic.
She came to me at a point in her life when she needed help, and it's like I could always use a friend, but right then it was like, I really needed her, and I think it was just, out of that necessity, we were just there for each other, and our bond has just grown stronger.
We often refer to those serving our country as heroes. Stephen Bonacarrere is an active duty Army Reserve officer with the National Guard. In December of 2019, he was deployed to Kuwait, Iraq, where he in fact became a hero to Sugar Cube.
I called her Sugar Cube just because she's white and she's sweet like a sugar cube.
But she wasn't always such a clean shade of white.
She looked pretty rough. She was muddy all the time because, it was so hot over there. But there was pools of water that she'd lay down in to cool off. She was pretty skinny when I found her because, I'm sure she just lived off scraps or whatever. A lot of the coworkers would say that there was 2 dogs on base, and one of them was really clean and one of them was really dirty. I was like, no, there's just one. So I started feeding her, and then, we got in the pattern of she'd always show up and be there on time.
It's cooling down?
She was so timid around people, and at that point she would approach me and she would actually let me pet her, which was pretty cool, but other people tried to approach her and she just wouldn't have it.
The relationship between a human and a dog is a curious thing. A dog will give unconditional love, but also somehow knows to teach it.
Like a symbiotic relationship. It was like, she was obviously in need of, love and attention, but I was too. I look forward to seeing her every day and every night.
In a war-torn country on the other side of the globe from Montana, fate was well at work.
Hi, Mommy.
but also at work was reality.
You can't explain to an animal, like, hey, you know, it's been a great 10 months, but I gotta go now. Hope you find someone else.
Hey, baby. Bye-bye.
Good girl. Yeah, now go play.
Stephen reached out to an organization called SPCA International, a global animal rescue.
There's a lot of service members that have brought dogs home with them in the past, and then I was like, okay, how do I do that?
He filled out the paperwork and waited.
I have to know in my heart that I did everything I could to try to bring her home.
Okay, we're set to fly.
Finally, Operation Baghdad Pups came through, sponsoring the cost of vet checkups, vaccinations, and a flight to a new home.
Got her food, and she's marked because we have other dogs going to Canada, so we know this one is the American one from the flag.
Sugar Cube beat Stephen home by 3 days.
Kirsty's like, I don't see anything.
I see you.
Many times when we think of a hero, we think of a man in a cape. For Sugar Cube, heroism came in the form of a young soldier from Montana.
Baby, hey, hey. You know, being over there in that experience, you know, we went through some stuff. You know, it's, you know, you talk with your family, but it's like, they'll never know what that place was like, or, you know, what you were going through at that time and period in your life.
It just goes to show, sometimes the force of fate is already working, long before we even know.
Just looking at her and just thinking about all the memories that we shared, and then I'd love to know what her story looked like before I met her and how she got there, and, you know, how she survived. I don't know. I mean, there's a million different possibilities of what it could have been.
A million possibilities of what could have been, but just one that was meant to end like this. In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
Thanks, Andrea. Great story. The nonprofit that Stephen used to rescue Sugar Cube serves dogs and cats. The group also has resources in a variety of countries, not just Iraq. Well, today marks 41 years since the most destructive volcanic explosion in modern U.S. history. On May 18, 1980, an earthquake triggered the eruption of Mount St. Helens, sending ash, mud, and debris hundreds of miles away. That explosion destroyed homes. It killed 57 people. It also blasted the top some 1,300 feet off of that volcano. Mount St. Helens could erupt again in our lifetimes. However, scientists say it likely wouldn't be as forceful due to that deep crater made 41 years ago. I mean, I was in high school here in Billings when that happened, and I remember they closed school the following day. It turned out to be a beautiful day. We all went up on the rims, I think. And then the following day, it grew dark and the ash started getting here.
Yeah, that initial blast, I remember, was so strong that a lot of it overshot us. Some of the ash made it all the way out to the eastern seaboard. NOAA estimated the strength of that as the equivalent of 25,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Temperatures are into the 40s and 50s across the state, as warm as the 60s and 70s into the eastern plains, and all of that with a cold front moving through. We'll break down how everything will start to change here in just a little while. With the complete forecast details, we've got rain, snow, thunderstorms, the whole gambit coming up for you.
If you haven't received your COVID-19 vaccine yet, listen up. This Thursday, you get another chance to cash in. County health officials announcing today a second anonymous donor gifted $20,000 to Riverstone Health Foundation. That money will turn into $50 for the first 400 Yellowstone County residents who attend Thursday's clinic at the Shrine Auditorium. Tweens, teens, and adults do not need appointments. Just walk in between 1 and 7 p.m. The afternoon and evening hours are meant to accommodate students better. Anyone under 18 will need to have a consent form signed by a parent or guardian. Again, that's for the first 400 Yellowstone County residents ages 12 and older who are receiving their first vaccination. You can head to this story on ktvq.com if you'd like to print the form in advance. Last week's session, which offered cash, brought in some 570 people for their first COVID-19 vaccine. Well, still to come on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2. A nearly 3-decade tradition continues as the Postal Service is partnering with a local nonprofit in hopes of stamping out hunger. That story coming up next. Then a little later in sports, we're going to take you to the Diamond where local softball teams are looking to book their ticket to state. Highlights on the way.